that this Kurdish peasant united the Arabs and created an army which had in it obviously Muslims, Jews in various capacities as physicians, as advisors, and many Arab Christians, which we forget, who saw fellow Christians coming from the north with astonishment. They said, we don't recognize these people as Christians. We are the real Christians who live in the Holy Lands, who have grown up here. Who are these guys who are coming and behaving in this fashion? So they fought. So it was a unified army that fought. And of course, within this army, there were lots of tensions. Quite amusing when you're reading the history of that period. The Syrian nobility, the emirs of Damascus said, why should we fight under this low-born Kurd? Some things don't change. Saladin himself, writing, saying the Kurds, once he had created the army, he said the most undisciplined and the most irritating group of people I have to control are the Kurdish tribes. Nothing changes. What to do? All these things are historically attested, but he did create the army, and he finally pushed back the occupation and the occupiers and took Jerusalem. But he did not permit his entire army to go into Jerusalem. He said, the bulk of my army will remain outside, a few of us will go in. Why? Because he knew that after 100 years of occupation and what the Crusaders had done, the basic gut instinct of his soldiers would be revenge, kill, burn, loot, rape, which happens in wars, then and now. So he said, no, we will not do it. This city must be a city for all the people of the book. Christians, Jews, and believers, our own people. And we must not destroy a single church. And we must not have reprisal killings. And we must allow those Christians who wish to leave Jerusalem to leave in peace and send them on their way. And that is exactly what happened. And that is the reason why the name of Saladin became an amazing sort of talisman for lots of European Christian writers. Because when many of the Crusaders came back, the ordinary soldiers, not their chiefs, they talked about the world they had seen. And they spoke to people. And they discussed it. So the image of Saladin was idealized, curiously enough, not so much in the Arab world of his time, but within the Christian world, within the Arab world. It's interesting. A number of Arab historians of that period were very critical of him, saying he was too lenient, too conciliatory, he should have taken Acre when he could, he should have done this, he should have done. Some of their criticisms were not wrong. But there were quite sort of sharp criticisms as well, which is interesting comment on the culture of that period, that despite the fact that he was the Sultan of Cairo and Damascus, Egypt and Syria, there were quite sharp criticisms by leading historians. It was in Europe that his name suddenly acquired an aura. And I mean, and you know, not just that, but fantasies were constructed around him. Myths were made around him, making him into a saint, which he certainly wasn't. But that, curiously enough, is what the European writers did, and it's interesting why they did it. The French legends of Saladin are in some ways the most interesting. There are quite a few of them. Stories written, poems, ballads, But they always show Saladin as fantastically intelligent, noble, courageous, tolerant. But then they add one other thing. He was on the verge of converting to Christianity. Because how could he be all these things and not be on the verge of converting to Christianity? And so that is one aspect they use. If we had a little more time, we could have converted him. And in a lot of these fables, they have Saladin visiting Europe, which never happened. So they're all historical nonsense, but it's interesting to look at them to see what his image was at that time. There is a famous story that on one of his trips to Europe, he was greeted by Philip II, and the Queen according to this French fable, because the French on the one hand, you know, have the dogma, and on the other hand, as we know, they're a nation of love. And so Saladin is on the verge of converting to Christianity, but okay, he doesn't do it, but in any event, he is a great lover. So we can't have one Saladin, we'll have the other. And in this story, a French chronicler has written, Saladin comes to Europe, he is feted by the kings and queens of Europe, he meets Philip II, and Philip II's queen, who is a young French woman, falls in love with Saladin. And the description of some of these things is that it's the queen who takes the initiative, not Saladin. He is happy to do his business, but the initiative is taken by the queen, who calmly and cold-bloodedly plots her adultery with an Arab leader. This is a 12th century document in which this is pointed out. So at least at that time, in parts of Europe, there was no problem of a white Christian queen going to bed with an Arab leader. Maybe Sarkozy will continue this in some way. So that was the way the French did it. How did the English do it? Because after all, the English were centrally involved in the Crusades. The English did it by painting Saladin, especially later on in the novels of Sir Walter Scott, as a great knight, a chivalrous knight, just as chivalrous as us, so that everything was equal. He was a chivalrous knight, Richard was a chivalrous knight, and this was a world of chivalry. The fact that we went and killed tens of thousands of people, well, let's not go into that all that much. Basically, it was two great guys fighting each other. So that was the English. What about Spain? Now, initially in Spain, there were no great mythologies about Saladin because they didn't need to do it really, because their own society and culture had all the Muslims they wanted, and according to the Catholic Church, too many. So they were not going to, and within Muslim Spain, amongst Muslim writers, there were one or two things, but nothing, mythological. They said it's wonderful that Jerusalem has been liberated, and it could become like us now, three cultures living together. Like we have lived in Spain like that since the 8th century. And in the 12th century, it would be good if Jerusalem, which has been wrecked, became like that too, but there was nothing more. But what you used to have in Spain, a lot of, were the debate, which never went on and which then extended into France and Italy as well. This was a story told about three rings, the ring you have on your finger. And there were so many versions of these stories, which was, we have three rings, they are made with the same colored diamond or glass, one is real,